Good evening. Lovely afternoon in Kenya, here at the Fairmont. My name is Mike Manfredo, and I'm a professor at Colorado State University. I'm co-chair, along with Jerry Vasky, of the Pathways Conference, and we'd like to welcome you here. We're really excited about this version of Pathways Conference. It's our first time out of the United States, and we're just so pleased that you have chosen to join us at this, and the terrific reception that we've had, and the abstracts that we've received, and the sessions that we have. I think you're going to be very pleased. I'm going to try and run through some of the context of the conference, a little background, and then we're going to have some plenary talks for this evening. But first things first, I would like to say thanks to some folks, namely the planning committee, which includes, in addition to Jerry Vasky, I'm going to ask these folks to stand up and see if they actually are tardy today or not. So they're playing hooky.
I'm actually here.
Jerry's here. We all know Jerry. Mordecai Ogata, Conservation Solutions. He's our local guy here. He's done an amazing job. Thank you so much, Morty. Brett Briere might be tardy. Brett's playing hooky. So get him when he comes here. Robin Reed, I saw earlier. Robin, are you here? Probably with Brett. And then we have honorary chairs as well for this event. Ed Warner, by the way, I'm from Warner College of Natural Resources, and that's named after Ed Warner. So Ed was very helpful with this conference, and Sue and Judith Rogers also were benefactors of this event. So they're honorary chairs. Now, I'll bet every one of you has had 1,000 emails from Esther Duke. And when this conference is over, there's going to be one thing for sure. You'll still be getting emails from Esther Duke. That's Esther Duke, and we would not have this event without Esther. She's done an amazing job. For all the people I just mentioned, let's give her a round of applause. So the title of this event is Integrating Human Dimensions into Fish and Wildlife Management, Pathways to Success. We started this conference series in 2008, and then we've held it every other year. And we've done that in the mountains of Colorado, not a bad place to do that. And we started to have co-organizers. We've had Cornell University as a co-organizer, and Michigan State, and Umeå from Sweden as co-organizers. And the event has always had a pretty consistent theme that we're pretty proud of. First of all, it has always had a strong international involvement. And at least like 30% of the folks that have come have been from out of the U.S. when I say international involvement. There's also always been a strong practitioner involvement. A lot of people that are on the ground doing stuff come to this, which we're proud of because we're very interested in the transfer of science to practice. And then there's also always been a heavy training component. And so that's one of the things that attracts, I think, folks that are practitioners. So here we are at our 5th event, and we decided, well, if we're calling ourselves international, perhaps we shouldn't just keep having this in the mountains of Colorado, and we decided we should have this elsewhere. And of course the question is where, and we decided Kenya, and you might say, why Kenya? But in fact, some people have said, why Kenya? And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, it's the place of dreams. And anyone that's interested in wildlife, this is the place of dreams where you're going to come see iconic species in their natural environment. So that's one very good reason. Second, it's a place of concern and challenge. There's been a number of articles that have come out that have talked about the decline in these iconic species over the 20th century, and it sustains over time. And we know that that's driven by human populations, of course. And so the related concern to this is the fact that right now the population in Kenya is 45 million or so, and it's expected to rise to 85 million by 2050. And another alarming part to that is the fact that it's a young population, and so we have around 18 million today that are employable, of employment age, and by 2050 it'll be 48 million, putting more pressure on the economy. And so it's a recipe for concern about conservation. Now, a third thing that I think is a real good reason for us to be here is it's a place of hope and innovation. And you're going to hear about that from some of the speakers. The trust notion as an innovation and governance is amazing, and I think it's something to be very proud of. And lastly, it's a place of friends and cooperators, with, at least from Colorado State standpoint. We've worked for years, and some of the folks on the planning committee, like Robin Reed, has worked for years here in Kenya, and we're really proud of the partners that we have here. And in fact, they're the first people we turned to when we thought about, should we have this conference in Kenya? We asked them, do you want to have this conference in Kenya? And there was an enthusiastic response and participation in the planning. And so it's an hour conference, and we've just been facilitators at CSU. Now, I want to point out a unique aspect to this particular event. When we started talking about doing this, I told you there's a training component to this. And we set a goal that we would like to have 60 local people that are involved in conservation come to the conference for training and be fully funded to do that. So you have full scholarship for that. And we met that goal. A lot of hard work, a lot of people involved in that. But there's two reasons we met that goal. And one is that the people that are doing the training volunteered their time to do that. And I don't know if any of them are here, if they're out starting the training. I think not, that they've been invited. But if are any of the trainers here? If you are, would you stand up? There are actually 19, but Kate Hill is representing them all. And Rob. Okay. I just want to thank the trainers for their time. It's a nice thing, and we really appreciate that. The second recipe, ingredient to that recipe, of course, I already mentioned, is the scholarship part. And we had a number of organizations step forward in giving donations. And I'm going to just mention a few. If you look on the back cover of the program, you'll see there are a host of people that have supported the conference. The one that's missing is the one that supports us every time, Pastor told me. That's Taylor and Francis, so I'll mention them first. They have supported us every time. And by the way, that's the group that publishes Human Dimensions of Wildlife, and so I had to say that because Jake is the editor. But I do also want to mention that USAID, the Prepared Project, was very important in providing funds. AID, Kenya and East Africa Office, World Wildlife Fund, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and African Wildlife Foundation. Or just those are the ones I wanted to make sure I mentioned, and we wanted to thank them. In fact, let's give them a round of applause. So that's some of the background and a little bit of the commercial messages. I've been asked by Esther to give some other detailed stuff that will be the minutiae of doing a conference. So, you know, we're in a fantastic place. You can see this is an unusual place, and it's fantastic, and it's not like the room isn't copious for dealing with large numbers of people. And so when we have the lunches, we have a 2-hour slot for lunches, and we can fit about half of you in there. So why would you want to be sitting in there eating for 2 hours when you could be out walking around the grounds? So don't get frustrated if you can't get in right off the bat. Kind of time your way in, and you know, we got a couple hours. And so the other thing that I was asked to mention is the beverages are on top. You have to pay for the beverages yourselves, and that's my role here to tell you those kind of things. So, anything else, Esther, about that demands?
Yeah, the Mount Kenya staff wanted me to ask all of you to let them know if you want a fire lit in your room tonight, because they all have fireplaces, and they were worrying about that, and I said people will just let them know if they want a fire lit.
So that means like the little thing that you turn that says light the fire, that won't do it.
No,
you gotta go to the front desk and say light the fire.
There you go. Or call.
Alrighty, so now our first speaker, very interesting. We at Colorado State had a visit from the contingent from the African Network for Animal Welfare a couple weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we're talking and visiting with them, and one of the gentlemen, Kahindi, started talking about the history of this area, and my mouth was again. I was just like, wow, how interesting is that? Everyone who comes to this conference should hear about that. And he said, okay. And so that's our next speaker, who's going to talk about sort of the history in and around this area and the human dimension of how it affects conservation. Kahindi Lekalhaile, I'm sure I butchered that, but I came close, I hope, is an amazing person. He's an Earthwatch Fellow in Madagascar, a recipient of the 2006 Disney Conservation Hero Award from Disney. He is a consummate journalist in conservation. As I've read through his Vita, and you can look at it in the program and read the detail, but what struck me is he's done everything as practitioners in conservation need to do. He's been a naturalist, an environmental education expert, a trainer in wildlife social work, field research scientist, ecotourism expert, university lecturer, community-based conservation advisor, and a program manager. I'm really excited to have him here, and so let's welcome Kahindi.
Yeah, about 4 weeks ago, I walked in Professor Manfredo's office, having accompanied my colleagues to University of Colorado just to say hello. And he said, we are coming to Kenya. I said, where are you coming in Kenya? And he said, we are coming to Mount Kenya Safari Club for the Pathways Conference. Of course, I had heard about it, and I had tried getting my foot in it. Unfortunately, I used Black Man's Time, BMT, instead of GMT to submit my paper. So it was late. But he said, you have a chance. Since you come from there, northern Kenya, then it would be nice to have you speak at the conference. And here I am. My job today is basically to give you a feeling of where you are in terms of location in the context of this particular conference. This place is aptly relevant to the Pathways Conference, and I will go through what that relevance is all about by looking at influential human dimensions that has led to the development of the current wildlife conservation status in this area. You are in the central to north part of the country, and this area is on the fringes of a county called Laikipia. The county is bordered by several other counties that actually go all the way up to Ethiopian border. Now, the wildlife in this particular county utilize Laikipia County and beyond. Laikipia County is about 9,000 square kilometers, but the dispersal area, mainly to the north of Laikipia, is about 20,000. So in total, this area is actually almost the size of Switzerland, or even bigger than some places in the United States. The people of Laikipia are so diverse. There are about 500,000 people living here. 400 of them live in Laikipia, and 100,000 to 150,000 of them actually live north of Laikipia. The interesting thing about this region is that it has all the major races in this part of the world. It has Bantus, it has Nilotes, it has Kushites, but it also has a substantial number of Europeans that are landowners here. The southern parts of Laikipia have a high human density, almost about 100 to 110 people per square kilometers. As you go towards the north, past Laikipia, a little bit into Isiolo and into the Samburu County, the gradient actually changes to almost 4 people per square kilometer. The landscape is amazing. You know, this is one of the greatest places that anyone would like to be in terms of wildlife. And it has a lot of sacred places, and one of the biggest sacred landmarks is Mount Kenya right behind this particular hotel. This is where the largest tribe in Kenya believe their god actually resides. Then to the north, we have Mount Nyeru, where people from my tribe believe our god resides. So in this area, you have 2 gods from 2 major tribes in northern Kenya. The landscape, again, has got a lot of history, but one of the interesting things that make it very well known is the people who have had life-changing experiences while being here. And one of them, of course, is the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, when one day she was woken up in the morning and told her dad, King George IV, was no more, and she's queen. She was actually sleeping a little bit to the southwest of where you are, in a place called Abadea's hotel called Treetops. Now, her grandson decided to come and kiss his bride right behind this hotel up the mountain there, and that's Prince William. This is where he actually proposed to the princess that, of course, became his wife. So it's a wonderful area that many people have actually come. The land use in this region is the most complex for any wildlife diversity probably anywhere in Africa. This is an area that has got ranches, both private and community. It's an area that has got community land, trust land, that's not actually ranches, but tribal lands. It has small agricultural holder lands. It has large flower farms. It has lots of interesting places, you know, coming up like conservancies and national parks and forest reserves. Now, most of the land in this particular region is actually ranches, and they begin from mid part of Laikipia all the way to the north. Now, in terms of wildlife, what is this area all about? This area has got the largest elephant population outside the national park network in East Africa. There are 7,000 elephants that live here. This area has got 90% of the world's population of the gravy zebra. This area basically has got probably the only viable population of the Jackson's hartebeest. When you talk about rhinos, the story is even sweeter. Apart from having over 60% of the rhino population in Kenya, it has the only 4 remaining individuals in the world of the northern white rhino, which actually got extinct in its natural range in Garamba National Park in Central Africa. These 4 individuals are not very far from where you are. In actual fact, they're about 32 kilometers to the west of where you're sitting. So if you really want to see extinction in process, please, in the course or after this conference, rush and see the face of an animal you never see live again. The rhino population, the eastern black rhino population in the country, over 60% again of it resides here. In actual fact, this is the largest population of the eastern black rhino in East Africa. Now, there are many other species that this particular area holds. For example, if we talk about the African wild dog, or the painted wolf, so it's called, we have in this region a substantial population, and probably the largest population of these animals out here. We have other small fry, like for example, the pancake tortoise and several primates. The point here is, in spite of the very complex land use pattern in this whole area, it still is a leader and a very significant holder of a very wide diversity of very important animals that have a high conservation value in the world. Now let's look at some interesting wildlife dimensions, human dimensions that have been so significant in this area, and they may explain the status of conservation in this whole area. Around the year 1500, this whole region from Laikipia all the way to Samburu was actually occupied by Gala-speaking tribes, the Wardei and so forth. But the Maasai, with their strong sense of domination, entered the area and began beating everybody to pulp. And they wanted to dominate not just Laikipia, but they wanted to dominate every single place north of them and south of them and everywhere. And there was a lot of warfare. They were fighting to the right. They were fighting Samburus to the right. They were fighting the Boranas to the left. They were fighting the Turkanas to the north. They were fighting everybody. And being very vicious warriors, of course, everybody submitted, and the Maasai expanded a lot. These wars went on until the 19th century, from 1800s, when a major catastrophe struck this region, and that was actually the outbreak of the rinderpest as well as bovine pleural pneumonia and several others. Smallpox also broke out at the same time, and a lot of people were wiped out, and a lot of livestock also perished. That virtually stopped the fighting, because the Maasais could not fight when they were sick. And basically all they had to do was basically try to emancipate a few things that they had. Interestingly, during that particular period, wildlife decided to proliferate. And when it actually increased in population, it so happened that in the year 1884, the Great Berlin Conference took place, where about 13 European countries sat down and said, okay, fine, let us actually divide up Africa. You take these, and you take that, and I take the other. So the British, of course, had Kenya, and when they came to Kenya, one of the places they actually came to was Laikipia. And there was a lot of interest, because the wildlife population was actually very high. And a company called the Imperial British East African Company was actually contracted to run the protectorate by Queen Victoria. And what happened is the protectorate had to generate funds in order to run and pay its dues back to the British monarch. And the main way for doing that was actually trading in ivory. Ivory trading had actually started way out with the Swahilis, the Chinese and Persians and people like those in this particular region. But when the British East African Company came, they were the big boys, and they said all ivory belonged to the Queen. And every single thing must go to the Queen. And we will actually have people coming out here to hunt and collect ivory. They will pay us for hunting, and we will also export the ivory for them. Now, the interesting thing about this is that a lot of hunters decided to come over. Some of those included Arthur Newman, who was a great, hunter, elephant hunter, and he was known for his forages out there. The other one was people like Theodore Roosevelt. Some records show that he actually got to the fringes of this particular area. But if you can imagine the 26th of the United States coming over for a hunting expedition here, then that was this was an area to actually reckon with. Told you exactly what was actually here. But people not only came to hunt, they decided, wait a minute, we'll actually even start getting some animals to take them back home. Now, the owner of this place, together with the ranch that hosts this particular hotel is situated, Don Hunt, William Holden, and Stephanie Powers, actually later on, a couple of decades down, decided to join the fray, and they bought this particular place, went and started exporting some animals for them. They would shoot, or they would actually capture them and take them all the way back there. And one of the main animals they actually exported was the bongo. The bongo is actually virtually extinct in most of its range here. And a lot of hunting and a lot of transporting of the bongo is actually what led to that particular status. But the interesting thing with Don Hunt, Stephanie Powers, and William Holden is that they created a ranch where they realized that they could actually contribute to putting this animal back to where it belongs. Now, hunting was so romantic in this area that they decided to actually import the red deer. The red deer is actually found in, those temperate places. And of course, it's not a native animal of here. And they brought the animal all the way to the Aberdares, a little bit north of where the queen became queen on that fateful night. And of course, the red deer did not survive. They brought in about 100 of them. And when I was, sometime back when I was reading the account of some of the wardens in this area, they record some Maasai saying, we saw some antelopes carrying a forest on its head. You know how the red deer always have those big antlers out there. And it was a very interesting account of how hunting was so great in this particular area that even introducing species like the red deer became very important. But in 1897, amidst all this area was declared a game reserve. Now, Yellowstone became a national park in 1870. This area was declared a British protected nature reserve in 1897. Kruger National Park was established in 1895. And of course, the British East African Company is the one that actually came with the first wildlife laws, to try and protect wildlife from all these marauding hunters all over the place. And they would go all over in every single place here. So when it came to Laikipia, Samburu, there were a lot of wildlife. There was rhinos, there was elephants, there was buffalo, there was lion, there was leopard. All the big five or the terrible six, whatever they call them, it was all here. And what happened is that wildlife protection was actually meant to protect the species from being decimated by all these gang-ho riflemen who carried all sorts of great guns to bring down an elephant within a second. And the British East African Company, having convened a conference in 1900, said, although we are doing a lot of hunting in Laikipia, Samburu, let us actually be civil about it, and let's actually start, controlling ourselves. Now, wildlife protection started declaring some zones for hunting and others not for hunting. And one of the things that actually happened is they started creating small little national parks. In 1948, they created the national parks in other parts of country, in other parts of Kenya. But the Kenya Lands Commission of that particular place said, no, in Laikipia, don't worry about it. Since the human population is very low, we will actually look at, the issues of hunting and make sure that the wildlife is actually not decimated. There are very many issues that actually came up, and a lot of people were actually suffering, as a result of their increasing livestock populations and their own populations. I remember reading about Samburu. In Samburu, what happened was very interesting. The government was really trying to bring and stop illegal game hunting. Now, there was a very thin line between legal game hunting and illegal game hunting. In actual fact, the fact that most of it was actually not controlled was actually legal game hunting. And the government decided the first people to actually hammer were actually the hunter-gatherers, the Yaku people, the Mukogodo, Maasai, and several others who were actually hunting. And they decided, no, we'll actually make them actually settle in places and there will be no more hunting. That was not actually very successful, because when the people stopped hunting, when the people were brought to settlements, they said, no, there's no way we can actually survive in an agricultural setting that you're actually making us stay, especially in a place called Wamba, right at the bottom of the Matthews Range. And we actually want to continue our hunting. But instead of hunting, we can actually do the ivory trade for you. We'll actually go out and get the ivory. So what the local people did, the hunter-gatherers did, is that they actually went out there and started collecting ivory. And this region became one of the biggest ivory collection and rhino horn collection centers in Kenya. the interesting thing is that there were so many collection centers that all the small towns today in Laikipia, not in Laikipia, but in Samburu and Marsabit, were actually trophy collection centers. Today, they are towns. And when you ask the old men, how did this particular town start, they will tell you which hunter came here, whether it was Chandler, Newman, or anybody, and this is where they actually used to collect, their trophies. Unfortunately, the hunting infringed on the cultural practices of quite a lot of tribes there that never used to hunt. Now, hunter-gatherers were considered poor people. These are people who, especially in my tribe, are considered as people with no stomachs, people who live on trees like baboons, and people who just have no dignity because they have no livestock. Now, I come from a community that is emotionally and economically attached to livestock. So hunter-gatherers had no livestock, so here they were participating in all these exchange of ivory and going to buy livestock. So people from my community, the Samburu, decided, no, we're also going to participate. Now, an age set called the Nkishili, right from 1952 all the way down, decided against the taboos of the tribe to participate in ivory hunting. And they used to carry 2 spears. Usually we carry 1 spear, but they used to carry 2 spears. One was for an opportunity of actually hunting and spearing an elephant out there. Now, it's taboo in my culture to date to actually hunt an elephant. And anybody who did that actually died, because it is believed an elephant is not an animal in my community, it is a moral being. So some of these moral and value systems that the people had out there were the ones that were actually facilitating the coexistence of people and wildlife. Now, come independent Kenya, and Kenya by then was trying to Africanize itself and see how do we actually start getting all this money. And Laikipia Samburu area seems to be attracting quite a lot of hunters, and we need to actually continue with the hunting so that we can generate foreign exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya was one of the main exporters of ivory and rhino horn until around 1971. Our port in Mombasa was actually constructed not to export coffee, but it was actually constructed to export ivory. We were big exporters of ivory. And at that particular time, populations have started dwindling, and everybody said, no, we actually need to stop hunting. In 1976, wildlife policy, no hunting in Kenya. It was all banned. No hunting. But hunting continued illegally because the networks, the rackets, the syndicates were so deeply entrenched, and there was no way of actually getting it. Then there was a lot of issue to do with human-wildlife conflict, and many people were saying, wait a minute, if you can't solve human-wildlife conflict in our situation, then we're actually going to continue with hunting. And I remember people in Laikipia and Samburu actually using that as a justification. In Samburu, where I come from, people declared that the rhino was a pest, and they speared it to extinction, because they said, actually, the rhino cannot actually live amongst us. But all they were saying is that the rhino horn, the price is actually lucrative and we need to hunt. But the excuse of human-wildlife conflict was the one that they actually used to exterminate, the rhinos in that particular part of the country. Great game wardens like George Adamson were actually part and parcel of, trying to control human-wildlife conflict. And George Adamson is recorded in history as being one of the biggest distributors of strychnine poison for lions, hyenas, leopards, and his dislike, especially for the spotted hyena. And he did this, and he's the one who actually influenced the government to basically distribute this all over, with the district officers and the agricultural officers. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are still using strychnine, to poison predators in this particular region. We're still doing that. And it's a big outcry, and there's a lot of awareness being created on how we actually should stop that. Then, because of all this hunting that could not be controlled in 1990, we changed our policy again, and it was just total disregard of poachers, no tolerance at all. This country, of course, went into the history of coming up with the shoot to kill order, where if you see a poacher, then shoot. I do not know how a poacher was actually determined if he was or not carrying ivory, but it was very effective. It stopped poaching. And then the thing was, if you stop poaching, then let's actually deal with the issue of why poaching is actually being supported by local people. And again, the issue of human-wildlife conflict actually came up. And And in 1996, a change of guard in Kenya Wildlife Service came up with the policy of parks beyond parks. And they said, since over 60% of wildlife in Kenya actually lives outside the protected areas, let us actually start core management of wildlife policies and programs with the people out there. And that led to a lot of communities actually beginning to participate directly in wildlife management. The parks beyond parks, the legacy is still being felt today. And in this particular conference, you'll be hearing a lot of exchange of information and an exchange and sharing of experiences of how that particular mentality is actually working. Benefit sharing is a big issue. Laikipia Samburu is actually one of the biggest destinations for wildlife benefit sharing. After the parks beyond parks mentality, a lot of communities started working with private ranchers and organizations and private companies, especially in tourism, to actually create areas that tourists could actually go. Since a lot of wildlife was dispersing outside protected areas, especially in Laikipia Samburu region, many communities started buying the idea that they could actually come up with their own tourism-based enterprises, of course, with the tour companies and the tour operators out there. And organizations or conservancies like Ilingwezi actually started off, and Tasia. And today we are talking about 30 conservancies, in this particular part of the country. It is one area that when you talk about wildlife benefit sharing, there is a lot of goodwill about it. I remember one conservancy near my home place called Namunyak. A colleague of mine went out there and said, why are you local people tolerating, in Samburu, Laikipia, this particular conservancy? And the people said, it's not because of the money. It's actually not because of anything, all the lucrative things and employment we're getting. It's because of security. Community-based wildlife conservancies changed the way local people started relating to land, and it was really the turning point. Now, today we are talking about increasing that model, replicating that model. And as I said, there are many people in the audience who will be sharing, their experiences when it actually comes to that. What are some of the notable legacies that we can see as a result of all these interesting, influential dimensions that date back all the way to the 18th and 17th century? One is that Laikipia Samburu, today as we speak, has got the largest and the highest density of community-based conservancies per region, in Africa. There are 30 plus community-based conservancies here, and they actually occupy about 40% of the land, of Samburu, Laikipia, out there, and these are actually run by local people. Secondly, with all this wildlife that has been dispersing in this area and all these very interesting dynamics, research has been done, whether it's by Save the Elephants or by Impala Research Center or by Kenya Wildlife Service or by overseas universities. And they have come up with interesting knowledge that has given us insights as to why and how wildlife actually interact with people. Then the community conservancy models are actually an indicator of sustainable development. And again, these are models that make a lot of assumptions that should actually be tested. And this particular conference, again, is providing an opportunity for that. Then we are looking again at wildlife value systems. Some of the old traditional ways of looking and coexisting with wildlife that had been suppressed when the local people were told you cannot participate in hunting, you can only be considered as poachers, are now coming back. People are beginning to now value wildlife with a new eye of benefits. And on top of that, the chance to actually participate in management of wildlife in a way that involves their decision and involves their own interest and aspirations is actually providing a win-win situation. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of things that you should be able to find out about this region and about some of the things I've actually gone through in my overview. I wish you a productive time, and I hope that you will be able to take away great messages as well as excellent lessons that can actually be replicated in other parts of the world, but also contribute to the knowledge that we have about how humans and wildlife coexist in a landscape like Laikipia Samburu. Thank you.